Aaron Rodgers already nicked up. We'll discuss his injury, plus Sam Darnold to start in San Francisco and new kickoff rules.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. He's Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. And no, we don't know for sure if Sam Darnold is going to start for the 49ers, but we will discuss him and that possibility coming up in just a bit. Thank you so much for making us your first listen here on Locked On NFL. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow wherever you get your podcasts. And Tony, let's dive in because Aaron Rodgers was traded to the Jets. The Jets get their guy. They get their quarterback. And he is supposed to be the guy that's going to get them over the hump, back to the playoffs, make them a contender in a really, really tough AFC conference. And yet on Tuesday, strained his calf, was described as minor. He confirmed it was his calf that he tweaked at practice. It might end up being nothing, but it could also be something. Aaron Rodgers a little nicked up here during the offseason program.
First of all, that sounds like a country music song. It might be nothing, but it could be something. So shout out to James Rapien for making a title to the next Taylor Swift hit, because I know that's your favorite artist. So listen, what would scare me about this more than anything is it might be a sign of things to come. Because I'm gonna tell you something. The older you get, the more you realize is you ain't got to do nothing wrong to get hurt, right? I mean, I've hurt myself going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and I didn't even hit my toe on the edge of the bed. It's just what happened. You know, you start pulling stuff that you didn't even realize you had. You know, I told the dude not too long ago, I thought I sprained the love handle at one point, and everybody ain't got those. The only old people have certain things. So if I'm a Jets fan, the one thing that you would be concerned about is not if he's going to be the Aaron Rodgers of 2 years ago. Like if the finger heals up, and even if he's the Aaron Rodgers of last year, that's better than having Zach Wilson, right? Especially when you got all these other good parts around. But the thing you have to worry about is this a precursor to old man soft tissue injuries constantly happening? Because the older players get, this is exactly what goes on, man. And you have to be concerned. They still need a competent backup. And what I mean is they need to have somebody, and I think every team does. Look, if you have to play with your backup for the whole year, you're probably going to miss out on the playoffs. But the Baltimore Ravens have shown you, if you have a guy that's competent for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, maybe to get you through a high ankle sprain or a concussion protocol, then it'll help you. But they're in a very, very tough division. And the last thing you want to see at this point is Aaron Rodgers hobbling for any reason, especially when ain't nobody chasing him.
Zach Wilson's chasing him. What are you talking about? That's what happened. I'm just
talking
kidding.
about defense.
It's a joke. I agree with you. And it kind of reminds me, earlier this week, what did we see? We saw LeBron James say, screw this. I am not getting swept. That's what he said. And he played all but 4 seconds, went to the locker room really all but 4 seconds against a Denver team that to me is clearly the best team in the NBA. We'll see if they win the title, but they're the best team to me in the NBA, and they're 4 wins away from doing it. And he gave them all he had. And if it was peak LeBron, then guess what? It would have been enough, because I've seen plenty of times where peak LeBron is enough to get one. It's enough to get one. Even against the great Golden State Warriors with KD, he put up 50 plus. It was good enough to get one, but J.R. Smith forgot the score. And that's what cost them, right? Missed free throws late, and J.R. Smith doesn't know how to count. So looking and comparing to Aaron Rodgers now, what happened to LeBron earlier this week? He came up short at 38 years old.
Yep.
If you're the Jets, you cannot expect, I know you gave up a lot for him.
Yeah.
I know he's making a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot expect Aaron Rodgers to be MVP Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean he won't be good. That doesn't mean that he's going to be injured all year or anything like that. I'm not going to jump to conclusions because he tweaked his calf during OTAs or during the offseason program. but it is a reminder that this is not the Aaron Rodgers of 10 years ago. No. This is not the Aaron Rodgers that beat Ben Roethlisberger in a Super Bowl or should have advanced to another Super Bowl if I forget the guy's name, could catch an onside kick and field an onside kick.
Or if the dude's when they got an interception, if the guy, his own player didn't tackle him, just let him run for the touchdown. He tackled him and told him to just go down. You remember in that same game in Seattle? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was Seattle. And all of those things, it's not the same guy. And so while I still think the Jets could be good, and I'm not trying to pour, just dirt on the Aaron Rodgers legacy, because I think he could still be really good this year because they have the right pieces around him. And I like Breece Hall and I like Garrett Wilson and I like some of their other pieces. By the way, Allen Lazard got nicked up on Tuesday as well. Let's just realize that, and hopefully the Jets know that they cannot expect MVP level Aaron Rodgers. I know there's a lot of pressure, and I think they can win games with good Aaron Rodgers, but that's kind of my expectation for him because he does have an injury history. Even in his prime, had some injuries. And so now you're talking about late 30s. Not everyone is Tom Brady, where they just stay healthy into their mid 40s. That's so rare. And I think Aaron Rodgers is dedicated. He might be a little weird, but he is dedicated. But to expect him to continue to play at an MVP level this year in New York, I think that's unrealistic.
So I don't think this is Matt Ryan going to the Colts. I do
Agreed.
think it's a little Phillip Rivers-ish going to the Colts the year before, where he played okay. He wasn't terrible, and he still had something in the tank. I think it's better than that, though. But what I mean, because I think Aaron Rodgers is better than Phillip Rivers, but Phillip Rivers was very good. So I mean, the variance of which guy they're getting, I think it's about equal because Rivers was still a very competent player when he went to the Colts. I just think as long as their expectations are measured and accurate, they'll be fine. And what I mean by that is, take some solace in this. It's better for them if he plays 2 years, right? So the first year in Denver, Peyton set the league on fire with 50 some odd touchdowns, right?
Yep.
The second year, the arm was gone. They won with defense, and he was just good enough here in his head to know when to and when not to make mistakes. I mean, the ball was fluttering all over the place. It was really bad, but it was good enough. And the second year is when they won it, right? So the charge for the Jets is to make sure you continue to build those things around him. And whereas the Aaron Rodgers that we know and love because of his greatness, you want him with the ball in his hand all the time, right?
Yeah.
Well, now you have to change that a little bit and say, no, we don't want that. But we know when we do call his name, because we're doing it in a limited capacity, he's going to be able to deliver. And the biggest thing about Aaron Rodgers' statistics over the years, to me, it wasn't those 45 touchdowns every year. It was the lack of interceptions. That part of it, to me, helps them understand. It should help them understand exactly what they have. You don't just have a dude that can throw 50 touchdowns. You got a guy that rarely throws interceptions at all. So that means the IQ is where it needs to be. And even if some of the risk taking goes away, he's still good enough to get you home.
I think as you were describing who it could be and who you could compare it to, Brady to Tampa Bay, you could look at all these guys that have switched teams late in their careers. I didn't necessarily plan on doing this, but I'm going to anyway. I've looked up Brett Favre's stats from the 2008 season with the New York Jets. First 11 games, completes 70.6% of his passes, is in the MVP race, 94 quarterback rating, 20 touchdowns, over 2,400 yards. They were 8-3. They had won 5 straight. They were flying high. I just said he averaged 70% completion percentage. The last 5 weeks of that season, he didn't touch 70. 4 of the 5 games, he completed less than 59% of his passes. That's the other part of this too. I think we'll see flashes of the old Aaron Rodgers in prime Aaron Rodgers, but can he be consistent enough? I think that's part of it. And it won't matter if you're not relying on him to be that. And so I think we're in lockstep here. Aaron Rodgers, still a good player, not in his prime. And if you're banking on him to save you, that's a lot to ask. Unrealistic. I don't think the Jets are. And so this still could work out. I'm not pressing panic because he nicked up his calf in the middle of May. But we need to continue this quarterback conversation. Let's talk about a dark horse starting contender for that quarterback job in San Francisco, Sam Darnold. There's some buzz around Sam Darnold. We will get to that next, right here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs continue to roll on in the conference finals, and you need to get in the game and get in the action with America's #1 sports book. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 and bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. From single game wagers, maybe you want to do a same game parlay, maybe you want to parlay 2 different games. You can do all of those things, and it's not just NBA. From Major League Baseball, maybe you want to look into the future and see some future NFL bets. FanDuel has you covered. There's no better place to bet on all of the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. So check them out right now at FanDuel.com/lockedon to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
And we're riding out here on Locked On NFL on a Wednesday. James Rapien riding shotgun next to Tony Wiggins here. And we're talking quarterbacks and the 49ers. That hasn't been a real good subject to be talking about over the last 4 or 5 years. But alas, here we are right back talking about quarterbacks and talking about the potential that Sam Darnold is the starter over Trey Lance while they wait for Brock Purdy. Did you get all of that? That Sam Darnold may start over Trey Lance while they wait for Brock Purdy. Give it to me, James. What's the report?
Wild, yeah. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reporting that some teams expect that exact thing to happen, Sam Darnold to push for that starting job. And he reported that on Tuesday. Interesting to me for a few reasons. One, you have Trey Lance sitting there, who was expected to be their guy. Mm-hmm. And obviously Brock Purdy played well last year, got hurt in the playoff game, and is rehabbing, and they're banking on him to be the guy long-term. At least that's the feel right now. But to me, I would just assume, okay, well then it's the Trey Lance show, and you have a guy in Sam Darnold who we kind of know what he is at this stage, but maybe we don't. Maybe some NFL evaluators think otherwise, because Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers, it sounds like, are going to have a competition for that starting quarterback spot. And let me ask you, and we have a limited sample size with Trey Lance, but who's better for the 49ers to start out the season if Purdy isn't ready? Is it Trey Lance? Is it Sam Darnold?
If I sat here and could give you that answer, it would actually go against one of my theories. And the theory that I have is, and I learned this from a former player, Jeff Lageman. If you have a quarterback issue like that, you know who chooses the quarterback? The players. The coach just sits back and watch. Okay, who do they follow? Our quarterback, if I put them both in the room and just observe them for 2 days, they will tell me who the quarterback is, because there's so much that goes into that position from a leadership perspective. But can I bring this up? I have to bring up, how have the 49ers been able to survive these tsunamis? And what I mean by that is, I have seen franchises, including the one that I cover, make an error at quarterback where they extended Blake Bortles and took Taven Bryan when Lamar Jackson was sitting there screaming to be taken by Jacksonville. And it totally changes your trajectory for a while. How did they take Solomon Thomas and not take Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson and end up in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, a couple of years after that, with Solomon Thomas not even a starter, losing to Patrick Mahomes, right, in a very close game? And then go out and sign, they had Jimmy Garoppolo for, some money, and they were still competitive, and he was in and out of the lineup. And then how on earth did they trade away 70,000 first-round picks to move up and take Trey Lance? That hasn't worked out, but yet and still, they are still in the top 5 of everybody's power poll. They're actually, what they're doing is going against the grain of everything that is supposed to sink you as a franchise, and they're still sitting there looking at you as one of the best teams in the league. And you say quarterbacks are so important. They're almost like the walking example of why they aren't.
They're such an exception. I agree with you. They've gotten it wrong
Twice.
essentially every step of the way. Now, part of it was Bill Belichick gift wrapped Jimmy Garoppolo to them for a nice second-round pick, and that certainly helped them. But overall, yeah, I agree with you. And twice in huge fashion. I remember that 2017 draft with Solomon Thomas, and whew, any of those quarterbacks would have made sense outside of Mitch Trubisky, which obviously they didn't have a shot at. But it is wild to think about, and that's why I can't discount this report with Sam Darnold. I can't say, oh, Sam Darnold didn't work in New York, didn't work in a weird Carolina situation, so he's just not going to work at San Francisco. Mr. Irrelevant worked last year.
Yeah.
Are you? Is anyone trying to tell me Brock Purdy has more physical gifts than Sam Darnold?
No, he
not
doesn't.
saying. Correct. Not saying that Darnold is going to be better and win the job and beat out Brock Purdy when Purdy's healthy. I'm not saying that. But is it crazy to think that a guy like Darnold could revitalize his career a bit in San Francisco? No, I think that's the perfect place. I mean, he's 26 years old, and or will be. He's about to be 26 years old in a couple of weeks in June. I think that there's certainly a path to that. Joe Burrow is 26, just to give you an idea. Sam Darnold is younger than Joe Burrow, even though he was drafted 2 years earlier. So I'm not willing to completely dismiss this. At the same time, man, oh man, how bad do you have to be, Trey Lance? This is supposed to be the offseason where he refined his mechanics. I know he was working out with Patrick Mahomes, all of those things. If Darnold is really competing and is making a training camp and preseason push to be the starter with Purdy out over Lance, then I think that's probably it for Trey Lance, because this is the time, this is the spot, all of those things. And here's the other thing. If the 49ers like what they see out of Darnold in this offseason program, don't be shocked if they consider trading Trey Lance. I know there was rumblings about it. I could see that happening. And part of the reason why is the backup for the team I covered last year, Brandon Allen. He signed in San Francisco as well. Brandon Allen isn't a guy that's going to do anything more than back up. But now you have three guys with Purdy out. Could you roll with Sam Darnold? Have Brandon Allen as your backup until Purdy comes back and then move on from Trey Lance? I think that would not be a shock. Put it that way. Would not be a shock if he gets traded.
And Lance has value because rookie deal, still very young, still has great tools. And if there are teams around the league that have aging quarterbacks that maybe have a year or two left and they're unsure about whether or not, for instance, the Rams, right? Something like that. That's not going to happen because it's in the same division. But you see my point, right? A team with aging quarterback, well, they don't have to rush him and they can get him in and see what it's like. Here's the thing with Darnold. Fabulous arm talent, right? What we always wonder about quarterbacks that don't succeed at their first stop or two, you look at the stops that they were at, right? And you say, those aren't ideal situations. And coaches have gotten fired and the team around them wasn't real good. The worry is that going through that broke them, right? And you can't get it back. I've seen it in high school recruiting and basketball where these teams want these kids. Kid goes to a stop. He leaves there. And I've actually had a coach tell me, I got to make sure he's not broken, because if it's the same guy recruited, then that's fine. But if he got there and his confidence is gone and he's not the same guy out of high school. So with Darnold, if he's able to do this, then that would mean that those two stops didn't break him. Yeah. Jameis is a little bit different because Jameis played for Arians and you saw the team get better when he left, and then he played for Sean Payton. So if those two guys can't get it out of you as a starter, then you're probably a career backup, right? Or you're a guy who is a stopgap person. This is a good situation for him. And if he plays well, I'll be interested to see what happens when Purdy does get healthy and he can come back. If they're rolling along, do you change it?
Yeah, it's a big question. And one of the NFL's bigger questions rule-wise involved kickoffs, and we got our answer on Tuesday. Let's react to that as well, coming up next here on Locked On NFL.
We're talking kickoffs. We're talking rules changes that players and coaches don't want. James, tell me what you heard. Explain it to me. You were out at practice today, and give me, if you can, some sort of reaction, if there was any reaction to it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So the NFL agreed now and it's a year-by-year trial basis, but you can use the fair catch signal on kickoffs now at any point inside the 25-yard line, and it'll automatically put the ball at the 25. And that was voted by NFL owners and approved. And they're saying for player safety. I don't know how much safer it is. I don't know. I know coaches, there are a lot of coaches that are like, it's not going to really change much. I think it's really getting rid of the kickoff. And it was already pretty done, I would say. There weren't many kickoff returns. And now, like, let's look at the teams we covered. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow. Do you risk the kickoff and returning it? Or do you just say, all right, I'm going to fair catch this and get the ball at the 25 every time, especially with those directional kicks that don't go into the end zone for a touchback? I think we're going to see less and less kickoff returns, Tone.
Jacksonville probably doesn't want it because they got a real good – Jamal Agnew's very, very good at kickoff returns. And he actually changed some games down the stretch when they were behind. I think Tennessee and even the Chargers game where he got a kickoff. They had to try to not kick the ball to him. And sometimes when the team tries to not kick the ball to you, hit that little knuckleball that goes out of bounds and you get it at the 40. So for teams that have invested with great kickoff returns and really, really – hit a hot spot with their backup players who play special teams, they're not going to like it. And for those teams who carry an extra roster spot for a guy who just kicks it out of the end zone. Like some teams don't even use their field goal kicker. They use like a punter who can really nail the ball and get it out. I think it's just going to affect the overall strategy. And I think a lot of these strategies are long-term and guys really get into the way that they build their teams and what they expect. And then a lot of coaches really sell special teams to really motivate young players. I just think no one wants that to be gone. People don't want the kicking game. They like to tell you that it's not just offense and defense, it's special teams too. I heard the special teams coach sometimes is the smartest guy on the whole team because he knows every single player because they, at some point he has to use them all as gunners or whatever. And then he's never asleep at the wheel because just like that, his guys are up, whether it's a punt return, a kickoff, change of possession when you don't expect it, a field goal block. They're in on everything. And that's why these guys are starting to be considered for head coaches because they just know the ebb and the flow of the entire team. So taking a little bit of power away from them, I just really like for sometimes when we talk about safety, I like you to ask the people who are at risk if it's more safe or not as safe. And I don't think that they would go against it. But yeah, it amazes me. So when you sent me that and I was like, I'm going to ask James something. Why does the league that is the number one thing, like the NFL is king, right? Why do they keep tweaking stuff? I know you want to stay ahead of stuff and I know you want to stay ahead of it's almost like I think this has the nexus for all this. They say it's safety, but I think it's them kind of avoiding responsibility for potential lawsuits, and it's protecting them that way than anything else because it definitely doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, help the game.
Yeah, I think it's premeditated, and whatever the reason behind it is. I think the NFL certainly wanted this to go into effect, and they've been pushing for it, and so they get it. And look, will it impact it much from a viewer standpoint? No, I don't think so. At the same time, kick returners are fun, man. And kick returns I think they can be safe. And there are ways that they've changed some of the rules to make them safer. I think some are going to shrug this off, but it does stink because it limits. There are guys in the NFL that made their living off of returning kicks.
Antonio Brown did. Steve Smith Sr., remember?
Yes. Yeah, but that's the thing is you take that part out of the game a bit. I'm not trying to sound like old guy here, but some of that is exciting. It is fun to wonder if Randy Moss is going to return a punt when he was returning punts for the Vikings. Like example here in Cincinnati, Pac-Man Jones, when he went back for a punt return, that mattered. And they've had some good kickoff returners as well. And so, Tab Perry back in the day would certainly be a guy. Brandon Wilson more recently was electric. We'll see, but I don't love it. And now when I just look at roster evaluations, I think that there are a lot of guys that can sit back there and fair catch the ball. And so you could just put your punt returner back there. But returning kicks is different. And now that guy might not have a roster spot as just a kick returner and backup running back or backup corner or backup receiver. Instead, you may just use your punt returner or use someone else. And that stinks because that's how some of these guys make their living.
Devin Hester's on the Hall of Fame ballot because of it. And last year, after Damar Hamlin, after that horrible incident that you knew about firsthand because you were actually in the stadium, the first game the Bills played, when they came back, they had a kid run 2 back, and the crowd went absolutely nuts. And it is a game changer. So, for clarity, if you're a team that has a good kick returner, Jamal Agnew will catch that thing 8 yards deep and bring it out. It's not going to stop the teams that have a guy back there that want to bring it out. So what it is you're just wondering if teams and coaches will go looking for or invest. I just saw Joe Marino going back and forth with someone today talking about how the Bills, with Naheem and the young man I mentioned, Naheem Hines, how they have an advantage in that area. I think it may prevent teams from prioritizing going out and finding somebody who can do that. And I think at the end of the day, it might stop a couple of young men who will use that to their advantage to get into the league and to make a name for himself. It might hurt them in the long run. So I think what bothers me more than anything is that it just seems like the players and the coaches don't want it, and it seems like nobody asked them. And the other thing is that they keep tweaking the best game in the world, and now they're saying it's a year-by-year basis. If it's a year-by-year basis, don't do it. Try it in the preseason. If it doesn't work, that's where I think they need to start seeing if things work. Or call that other league and see what things look like. But you got the best product in the world, man. At some point, you just don't mess with it.
He's Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thank you so much for listening to Locked On NFL.